In the winter of 1941, the Fortune mining camp was a beacon of industry in the remote Alaskan bush. Perched on the edge of the Kayakuk River, it was home to 47 men who were chasing a vein of copper so rich they called it the Devil's Pocket. They were tough, self-sufficient, and determined to make their fortune before the world was swallowed by war. But in December that year, the camp went silent. The radio crackled with static and then died. The supply plane that was scheduled for a drop-off circled the coordinates, but there was no smoke signal, no flashing mirrors, nothing. The pilot reported seeing the camp intact, but completely devoid of life. Not a single footprint in the snow. Search parties were dispatched, but the winter was brutal. They found the cabins exactly as they had been left. Meals were half-eaten on tables, tools were neatly stored, and the gold, the copper ore, was stacked high in the warehouse. But the men?
Gone.
Vanished, as if they had simply walked into the blizzard and dissolved. The government declared it an accident. The files were sealed, the location was struck from the records, and the camp was left to the mercy of the snow and ice. For 80 years, it was a ghost story told to greenhorn miners, a warning that the wilderness doesn't care about your plans. But ghosts are just stories until someone proves they're real. And her name was Dr. Lena Vance. Lena wasn't a treasure hunter. She was a historical climatologist. She studied ice cores and permafrost to understand climate patterns. But her latest project had hit a wall. She had stumbled upon a weather log from the 1940s that contained data from a remote station, a station that didn't officially exist. When she cross-referenced the coordinates, she found only one name attached to the area: Fortune Camp. The files were thick with redactions, but one detail stood out. A single page stated that the camp's medical officer had been collecting organic samples for the military. Biological samples. Lena knew that the permafrost in that region acted like a natural freezer. If the camp had been frozen for 80 years, the organic material inside might still be intact. And that material could hold the key to understanding a pathogen that the military was studying, a pathogen that had been lost to time. She wasn't there for the copper. She was there for the data. But to get the data, she had to get inside the camp. The journey took 3 weeks, a flight to Fairbanks, a bumpy bush plane ride to a frozen lake, and a grueling snowmobile trek into the interior. The weather was deteriorating. A storm was building on the horizon, but Lena knew she had a narrow window. If she waited, the camp might be buried for another 80 years. She pushed forward. She found it at dusk. It was exactly as the reports described. The buildings were preserved in a state of perfect decay. The roof of the mess hall had collapsed under the weight of decades of snow, but the core structures were still standing. It was like walking into a museum of frozen dread. Lena entered the main bunkhouse. Her headlamp cut through the darkness, illuminating a world frozen in amber. A harmonica sat on a bunk, covered in frost. A deck of cards was spread out on a crate, the game interrupted mid-play. There was no struggle, no signs of violence. It looked like they had simply stopped. She found the medical office in the back of the supply shed. The door was locked, but a heavy kick from her boot shattered the frozen wood. Inside, it was a mess. Filing cabinets had tipped over, scattering papers on the floor. A microscope was shattered on the ground. But the most striking detail was the wall. 47 names were carved into the wood. But under the names, in a shaky hand, someone had carved the date, December 5th, 1941. And below that, a single sentence that sent a chill down Lena's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. We couldn't control it. Lena wasn't looking for treasure, but she found something far more valuable and dangerous. In the corner of the room, buried under a collapsed shelf, was a steel strongbox. The lock was rusted, but she managed to pry it open with a crowbar. Inside, there was a logbook. The first few entries were routine. Weather reports, mining yields, complaints about the food. But the entries from November 1941 painted a different picture. The miners had broken through a new layer of rock, deep in the mine. The rock wasn't hard. It was soft, almost porous, and it pulsed with a faint heat. They had tapped into a geothermal pocket, or so they thought. But the air that escaped smelled like copper and iron, and something else. Something sweet. The logbook described the singing. That was the word the miners used. A low-frequency hum that resonated in your teeth. It started at night. Men reported seeing shadows that didn't belong to them. They woke up with nosebleeds and a metallic taste in their mouths. The camp doctor, a man named Dr. Elias Crane, became obsessed. He wrote that the resonance was altering the water table. It was shifting the soil chemistry. He believed they had stumbled upon a geological brain, a mineral formation that could store and transmit electromagnetic frequencies. He called it living rock. The final entry was dated December 4th, 1941. It's in the air. It's in the water. The ice isn't preserving us. It's muting us. We must stop the signal. If we bury ourselves, it might stop. The ice is the only insulation. And then the last line. We're going to sleep. She peered inside. The shaft didn't go straight down. It sloped at a gentle angle, and at the bottom, she saw it. The ice. But it wasn't clear. It was infused with a strange, swirling pattern of copper and black ore, like veins of frozen lightning. And inside the ice were the miners. They hadn't vanished. They had walked into the mine, into the source of the hum, and they had frozen themselves. On purpose. To contain whatever it was they had awakened. Lena realized the truth. The camp wasn't abandoned. It was a quarantine. Those men had sacrificed themselves to stop the signal from reaching civilization. But the hum was still there. It hadn't stopped. It had just been sleeping. Lena grabbed the logbook. She knew she had to leave. She couldn't stay. Not because of the storm, but because she realized the camp was still active. The ice was the only thing insulating the signal. She revved the snowmobile and tore away from the camp. The storm was a whiteout, but she followed her GPS blindly. For hours, she drove, the hum fading, replaced by the roar of the engine and the howl of the wind. When she finally reached safety, she looked back. The storm had swallowed the valley. Fortune Camp was gone again, sealed by ice and snow. But she knew the truth. She had the logbook. She had the story. And she knew that while the miners were sleeping, the signal was still there, trapped in the ice, waiting for the day the planet warmed enough to release it. Lena did what she had to do. She gave the logbook to the authorities. She told them the location. They told her she was suffering from exposure and sent her home. But she knows the truth. The official reports call it a disappearance. They always have. But now she carries the weight of it. The weight of 47 men who traded their lives for ours, frozen in the dark, waiting. The lost mining camp sat frozen for 80 years. She was the first to reach what they left behind. And she was the first to realize that some doors are frozen shut for a reason. What do you think happened to the miners? Was it madness? Or was it mercy? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe for more lost histories.